Thank you so much. I echo what a lot of the other people who have been up here already today had to say about welcome, and that we share in the excitement of being able to help you. And I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our speaker for the workshop session this afternoon. The workshop is entitled Introduction to the Canadian Workplace, and it's going to cover a few topics related to health and safety, employment standards, Canadian workplace culture. And the purpose of sharing this information with you is really so that you have the knowledge that you need to be able to be safe on the workplace and to know what your rights are. And this is also information that you can share with other people in your community. And there's going to be some handouts given. I know all of you have been given a bag already, so you can also follow along with the workshop presentation that's in the bag. Our presenter for this afternoon is also from BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada. She's one of Ellen's colleagues. Her name is Amber Neville, and she is a commercial account manager. In this role, she provides tailored financing and consulting solutions to small and medium-sized businesses in Toronto. She has a bachelor's degree in commerce and a certificate of labor studies from the University of Windsor. She has collaborated with organizations such as Access Employment, where I work, the Toronto District School Board, Conestoga College, and Career Edge. You're going to be meeting Career Edge later on in the networking portion today. To explore new talent pools and to build partnerships to promote inclusion and the employment of internationally trained professionals like yourselves. Her areas of expertise and passion are in diversity, recruitment, relationship management, and entrepreneurship. We're very glad to have you here today, Amber. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Happy Monday.
Same to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Same to you. That gets you a prize. There we go. There we go. We're going to talk a lot about the law, so it's not as dynamic as some topics today, so I'm going to try to keep it fun and light. So I've got another prize. I know that where you guys are from. You don't know where I'm from. Hands up, does anybody know where Chatham, Ontario is? For a prize, at the back. For guy in the purple shirt's the first one I saw. So I'm from Chatham, Ontario. It's about 3 hours southwest on the 401. That's where I was born and raised. It's a city of about 45,000 people. And then I went to the beautiful, picturesque Chatham, Ontario. Let me do my little plug. Then I went to the University of Windsor. You see the W on the map there. It borders the Detroit border, where I got my Bachelor of Commerce degree and I got my Certificate of Labor Studies. And then the best thing in life happened to me. I moved to Toronto, the big T there, and started working for the Business Development Bank of Canada and the Human Resources team. So the reason I'm here today is because I love my job and I love the bank. I love human resources and I love working with people. And I also love entrepreneurs, which is why I'm a commercial lender now. The cool thing about the BDC offering this session to you today is, like we said, we focus on small and medium-sized businesses. So I've got another prize, ladies and gentlemen. How many % of employers in Canada do you think employ between 1 to 99 people? Oh, gray shirt in the back.
It's like 60%, something like that.
Higher than that. Another guess. Higher than 60.
80%?
Higher than 80.
95.
95 is close. For the purpose of the next session, 98.2% of employers in Canada employ between 1 to 99 employees. That means we're likely to work in smaller groups of people. Okay? So we have an interesting experience here. Ellen and I working with great employers like Access, great other community partners, and then us really having a focus on small and medium-sized businesses. So as we go through today, we've got this agenda. We're going to talk about employment standards, again, the law, occupational health and safety, human rights code and discrimination, and then we're going to give you some insight on the Canadian workplace. This is my favorite, but we have to cover the others so you guys know the landscape that you're coming in to work as employees. I am a talker. I talk fast, I use my hands, I get all excited, I'm big and smiley. If I go too fast, slow me down. If you need any translation, we've talked about that in the room. Work with me. If you have questions at any time, put up your hand, stop me, ask the questions. We really want to make this as useful and as informative as we can. So let's get started. Employment Standards Act. You guys have this in your handouts. On one side is English and on the other side is Arabic. The Employment Standards, guys, it was established in 2000 These are the minimum standards for workplaces in Ontario. These are the basic rules your employer must follow. So the government has said, on relation to these topics, hours of work, wages, vacation, etc., there are minimum standards. Employers cannot pay below a certain level. They can't give below a certain level of vacation. And we're going to talk about these subjects so that you are aware of what the minimum standards are as you begin your employment journey in Ontario. One thing I want you to remember about the Employment Standards Act, and this is really important to remember, employers are prohibited from penalizing employees in any way for exercising their rights under the Employment Standards Act. What does that mean? That means if I'm employee Amber and I notice that I'm working more than 45 hours a week, but yet I'm not getting overtime pay, I can talk to my employer and say, I don't think this is right. My employment standards rights say that after 44 and a half hours, I'm entitled to overtime pay. And I cannot be penalized in any way, shape, or form for addressing or bringing this up with my employer. You are protected to have these discussions if you find that your employer is in violation of any of these rules. Okay? So you're not going to lose your job if you say to your employer, my check isn't enough, or there's an error here on how we calculated the wages, or I'm entitled to this and I haven't been given this. You're empowered to have these discussions, okay? So let's talk about what these employment standards are. And just so you know, there's an Arabic version. So on the back of your handout, there was an Arabic version. The Ministry of Labor, and we're going to talk about the Ministry of Labor, is really good at providing resources not only in English, but in other languages as well. That way we can ensure that there's a good understanding. So start off with a question. What's the general minimum wage rate in Ontario? Between
18.
lower than 18. How many dollars an hour? 11.25. I bet he looked at my presentation, but that's okay.
No, because they increased it to 11.7.
We'll raise it.
So the general minimum wage rate in Ontario is $11.25 an hour. $11.25. And that's as of effective October 1st, 2015. We see that effective October 1st, 2016, that's going to move up to $11.40 an hour. So this is common in Ontario. In Ontario, often what the government will do is they'll look at the cost of living, they'll take a look at different factors, and they might suggest that the employment minimum wage needs to go up. If so, it will be educated via the website. Your people that you work with will know, employers will know. But this is the base wage that you should be accepting if you're going to start your job. Now there's some exceptions. You see that there's student minimum wage, liquor servers, etc. I'm not going to go into this, but it's on your handout, so that way if you need to refer back to it, you can. There are some different minimum wage rates depending on if you're a liquor server. So for example, if I work at a bar, at a restaurant, and I'm serving liquor, I get a lot of money in tips, right? As opposed to if I work at Tim Hortons, I'm not really getting a lot of money in tips. They're paying me just the general minimum wage. So the minimum wage for liquor servers, as you see, is $9.80 an hour. So it's slightly less than the general minimum wage, but the idea is that they are also getting tips. So that kind of balances it out. So just be aware that this is the general, applies to almost everything, but there are certain rules. Has anybody heard of working on commission?
Yeah.
Working on commission? So that's an interesting example too, because the minimum wage changes, and some of you, a lot of new Canadians that I've met, have taken jobs where they're working in a sales or a commission-based role. How it works is that if an employee's pay is based completely or partly on commission, it must amount to at least the minimum wage for each hour the employee has worked. So what that means, and we're going to give an example here with Luba, it says that Luba works on commission and she's paid weekly. One week she made $150 in commission and worked 25 hours. What needs to happen here is that Luba needs to make, the minimum wage is $11.25. So if we multiply that by the 25 hours, that's $281. Luba is owed the difference between her commission pay of the $150 and the minimum wage. So she's owed $131. So keep in mind, if you take a commission job, educate yourself on the structure, because if you're not making enough commission that equals out to that $11.25 minimum wage rate, then you need to be having a discussion with your employer or getting clarity, from somebody at the Ministry of Labor in terms of how your pay works. So this slide on wages, guys, I know it's busy and a lot of the presentation is going to look like this. I want you to walk away going, I'm entitled to a minimum wage. Everybody on that same page? I'm entitled to a minimum wage. Yeah. And for most cases, that minimum wage is going to look like $11.25 an hour until we hit October 1st of this year. Okay? Terrific. We're off to a great start. So I had to go into wages because everybody is concerned about the money, right? Where the money's at. This is the big thing. Wages are, I don't know how different it's going to be from your previous experience, but you're entitled to be informed about some different things about your wages. So your employer, number one, needs to establish a regular pay period. So that's law. What that means is they need to come up with a reoccurring time you're going to get paid. Very common in Ontario is on a bi-weekly basis. Has anybody heard of that, getting paid every other week? Every other Friday or Wednesday. Another common one is the 1st and the 15th, because there's a 1st and a 15th in every month, so that's another common one. But so long as it's regular and it's pre-established, this is something that you need to know. We don't want employees in Ontario going, when's my next paycheck coming? When my boss decides to cut me a check? No, it's on a regular agreed amount, agreed time. That way we can plan our bills and our other outings, etc. So this is a legal right when you enter into an employment relationship. You want to know when your payday is. Second one, the employer has to pay all the wages earned during each pay period, other than vacation pay. So it's not over a 2-week period. I work 10 days, and you're only going to pay me for 5 of those days. Nope, you're going to pay me for the full 10 days. Anything you earn during that period needs to be paid to you. And we're going to talk about vacation pay, so I'm going to ask that we park that one for right now. But whatever you work in that pay period, you need to be paid for. Employer may pay your wages by 3 options: cash, check, or direct deposit. Keep in mind the direct deposit needs to be in your name. It can't be in my brother's name, and I can't be getting it direct deposited into his account. It needs to be in my name. But here are the 3 options. And along with that, they need to have a wage statement. Pay slip is another word for it. And on that wage statement, they're going to give you the pay period, the wage rate. Again, what's our minimum wage in Ontario? 11.25. So it's going to tell you what your wage rate is. We're all hoping for higher than 11.25, right? So that should be on there. The gross amount of the wages and how they were calculated, the amount and purpose of each deduction, because you will have deductions, and then the net amount of wages. So the net amount is this number here, what's going into your bank account or that check at the end of the day. Yep.
What's the deduction?
A deduction is an amount of money taken off of your paycheck for one of a couple purposes. So there is income taxes, employment insurance premiums, and Canada Pension Plan. All of us as employees participate in these programs, and our employer takes a percentage of our gross pay off of each check and gives it to the government for these particular plans. So, income taxes. We have to pay the tax man. Death and taxes, they say that's the 2 things you can be sure of in life. In Canada, that is definitely the case. Employment insurance premiums. Beautiful thing about the province of Ontario is if for some reason you are out of work, let's say you're laid off, etc., there is what we call employment insurance benefits. And as a community of workers, we all pay into this off of every check, so that if I were to, say, lose my job, if the BDC were to shut down for some reason, I would be able to go on employment insurance benefits, and the government would give me a check, I think it's a weekly check, but for a period of time to help ease the financial burden of me looking for work until I'm able to find other employment. So this is a mandatory deduction that's going to come off of your paycheck. And then Canada Pension Plan, the beautiful CPP. And again, Canada, we're awesome for acronyms, so you'll get used to these. CPP goes towards your retirement savings. So once you're done working and you are going to collect a pension, there is a government pension that's offered in Canada that we're going to contribute into. Terrific. So what I'm going to suggest to you guys is when you get your first paycheck, this is going to be new. You're going to see the first, Canadian paycheck. What I would encourage you to do is to go and sit with your boss, or if you've got a great HR team like we do at the BDC, sit with them and have them explain to you your first one. Just have them walk you through it and say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. This went to the employment insurance. Oh, that makes sense. It went to CPP, and get a sense of what that paycheck looks like. And every time you get a pay stub, you should be taking a look at it to make sure that your hours are correct and to make sure that you're actually being compensated for what you've put in. Okay? Terrific. So we got a minimum wage, and we're getting paid regularly by cash check or direct deposit. We're on a good pace, right? What else are we entitled to? Ooh, 3-hour rule. This is an important one for anybody who's going to be in the service business. What this means is the minimum time that your employer can schedule you for is 3 hours. So if they call you in for a 5-hour shift, this happened to me. I worked at Burger King in high school. Everybody love Burger King? Worked at Burger King in high school. And they'd call me in for a 5-hour shift, and then we'd have no customers. It's a snowstorm, nobody's coming in, and it's an hour and a half in, and they go, okay, Amber, you can go home now. They have to pay me for a minimum of 3 hours. Okay? So this is the 3-hour rule. They can tell them, yeah, you can send me home. That's fine. But I get paid for 3 hours. Thanks. So up to you. That's another point to cover. Hours of work and overtime. This is such an exciting slide. Let's jump right into it. The maximum daily and weekly limits on hours of work are 8 hours a day, or the number of hours in a regular workday if it's more than 8. So what I want to share here is things like nurses, right? Nurses often work 10-hour, 12-hour shifts. That's okay, but it's predetermined. We've already agreed to that. It's not the employer saying, hey, you've always worked 8 hours, and now you need to start working 10. It's something that we've agreed to in advance. And 48 hours a week. So they don't want you, this is the most that they want you working. Then they say you're entitled to rest periods, so breaks. Everybody understand the concept of a break? So a break basically means that 30-minute eating period after you work 5 hours of work. So at Burger King, I'll take you back to my Burger King example. If I had a 6-hour shift, I was entitled to a 30-minute break after I worked the 5 hours. It's unpaid. These are unpaid breaks. But the idea is that as workers, we need rest. And the reason why this legislation was created is because if we go back 100 years ago, employers didn't want people to rest. They wanted them to keep producing, keep working the factory lines, keep things moving, and people got sick, people got tired, people felt that they weren't being given the appropriate rights. So this is why we have rules when it comes to the hours that you work in a day, the amount of hours that you work in a week, and when you get breaks. So keep in mind here that you are entitled to 11 consecutive hours off work each day. So if I work until 8 o'clock at night, I have 11 hours that I need to be off before my next shift is scheduled. You have 8 hours off between shifts, unless the total time worked is 13 hours. So really common is the TTC. They'll say that it's a full-time job, but you have split shifts. You work the core hours in the morning, let's say from 6 to 10, and then we want you to come back in and we want you to work, let's say from 1 to 5. So that's okay, but know going into it that these are the rules which they're governed by. Next on the agenda, overtime pay. So for those of you who really like to work hard and want to make as much money as possible, this is possible. What happens is after you work 44 hours, your employer must pay you at least 1.5 times your regular rate of pay. So for example, let's go back to Burger King. I work my 44 hours. I'm making $11.25 an hour. And then as soon as they say, Amber, I need you to stay an extra hour, and I hit 45 hours, that extra hour is going to be my $11.25 times 1.5. And so 45 hours, 46, 47, all those consecutive hours after 44 are going to be applied to overtime pay. Okay? Any questions?
How we're saying 48 hours a week, it means 4 hours overtime?
So here's the thing, your employer can ask you to work 4 hours of overtime, but you're entitled to this wage rate. So after 44 hours, so that 44 to 48, you get a premium for working those hours.
Okay.
They can legally ask you to work up to 48. However, they cannot mandate you to work any more.
Okay.
Good question? Yep.
I've seen 37.5 hours weeks.
Yep.
One of those.
So really, you can work any amount of time. We have the 3-hour rule, right? So you're at least going to be working 3 hours with an employer. You could work an extended amount of time. Some people work 60 plus hours at their job, depending what their employment is. 37.5 hours, that's what I get at the BDC. I'm a 37-hour full-time individual. Really, that just means, so there's two things to consider. Number one, are you a salaried employee? So it doesn't matter really how many hours I work. I earn a salary for the full year. Or am I an hourly employee, which means the $11.25, et cetera, applies to me. So on the 37.5, if you see a job that says it's going to be 37.5 hours and that's full time, then that means that their Monday to Friday or Tuesday to Sunday, whatever the schedule is going to total 37.5 hours. In Ontario, anything usually over 32 hours a week is considered full time. What I would empower you guys to do is say, okay, great, I have a full-time job. It's going to be 37.5 hours a week. What is included in full-time? And the idea is that if most employers are going to go above and beyond these minimums for you, these are just the minimums that are set out. But if I'm a full-time employee, sometimes that entitles me to other things like employee benefits. which is something that we'll cover but is not part of the Employment Standards Act. It's not mandatory that employers provide employees with benefits. But some organizations say if you're a full-time employee working over 32 or 37 or 40 or 44 hours a week, then you're entitled to employer-sponsored benefit plans. Any other questions on this before we move on? So again, just know what your rights are in terms of the hours that you're working. I think that most of us are struggling to get to the point where we're getting 8 hours a day or we're getting 44 hours a week. But if you're getting yourself into a situation where a lot of time is being offered to you by your employer, make sure that you're being compensated fairly in terms of overtime pay, and make sure that you're getting the appropriate breaks that you need. Okay? Next topic. Vacation. So for a prize, how many weeks of vacation is somebody entitled to in Ontario after a year of service?
3
weeks.
2 weeks. Lucy, right here with the 2 weeks. I'm going to Cuba next week, so I've got the beach in front of me. It's just where my vacation mind is set. Employment Standards has 2 parts when it comes to vacation time and vacation pay. Employees are entitled to 2 weeks of vacation time after 12 months. So I heard a lot of you during Ellen's presentation say you've only been here a couple months. Once you hit a 12th month of service, so let's say we all get employed tomorrow, then it would be March 22nd, 2017, we would be entitled to take 2 weeks off of vacation. So after 1 full year, you get 2 weeks, and your employer's usually really good at this. They just say, when do you want to book it? You communicate with your boss in advance, you book the time off, etc. So something, yeah?
2 weeks include Monday, Saturday and Sunday?
2 weeks is 5 business days, typically 5 business days. So, sorry, 5 business days in each week, so you'd be talking at 10 business days.
Is it paid vacation?
Paid vacation. Paid vacation. Vacation pay is different than vacation time, okay? Vacation pay must be at least 4% of the gross wages earned in the 12-month vacation entitlement year. So in addition to the vacation time off, the 2 weeks that you're going to get after working for them for a year, you're entitled to 4% vacation pay. I'm going to say here, your contract of employment or collective agreement, if you're unionized, may provide a benefit that's greater than what we're discussing here. A lot of employers go above and beyond the vacation that's set out in the Employment Standards Act. So for example, I get 3 weeks of vacation at the BDC. This is above and beyond the Employment Standards Act. Keep in mind here, because we said you don't get vacation time until you work for a year. After working 1 hour for an employer, so tomorrow at 10 a.m., after we've all reported in at 9 at 10 a.m., we earn 4% on that 1 hour. So this is the point down here saying that employees earn vacation pay as they earn wages. So if an employee works even just 1 hour, you're still entitled to that vacation pay. Typically what happens, I'll go back to my Burger King experience, my employer said we're going to pay it out twice a year. We're going to pay it out at Thanksgiving, and we're going to pay it out on the May long weekend. So I would get an additional amount added to my check for my 4% vacation pay that I had earned. Alternately, they might do it once a year, or let's say you part company with your employer before they've made a payment, that'll be added to your last pay. So after 1 hour, you're entitled to vacation pay. Public holidays. I've got another prize. How many public holidays do we have in Ontario?
12.
Less?
14.
Less? 9. This is a dual prize. You got to hand this one away. So pass that one on to a friend. Whoop. We've got 9 public holidays in Ontario. And what a public holiday means is that most employees are able to take these days off work and be paid public holiday pay. I thought I saw a hand. So in terms of the work, if you do work on the holiday, you'll receive the public holiday pay for the hours worked on the public holiday. Usually that's the 1.5 times that we talked about the overtime rate. Or you get your regular rate for your hours worked on the day, plus you'll receive another day off called a substitute holiday with your holiday pay.
Okay.
So you've got options.
Yeah.
Back to my Burger King example, and I know I'm a broken record. I'll tell you all the other fabulous places I've worked before. I always had to work on these days. You know, it's New Year's Day, etc. I always had to go into work. What would happen is I would get a special holiday pay. So it is common on certain industries that they are going to be open and you might have to work. So it says some employees may be required to work on a public holiday. Think, like I said, of nurses, doctors, people like this who those institutions are open 24/7, 365. Depending on the work field that you're going into, this might apply to you.
So this is mean we can get this holidays if we worked on it in this holidays. We can get it later, like
Yep.
we can collect all of them and get.
It's going to be a discussion that you have with your boss. Your boss is probably going to give most people the day off because on these times they're usually not as busy times, right? People are out with their families, they're at home, but they still need a core group of people to run the business. So you have this discussion with your boss. You can say, hey, I'm open to working all of the holidays. If I can take them as other days off, I'm open to do that. And that would be an arrangement that you could have with your boss. For the majority of situations, it's safe to assume that you will have the day off with others and that you will receive a pay for that day because it's a paid public holiday. Benefits. So this is the one I said we'd come back to. And I wanted to highlight this one because you hear a lot of people, particularly in Toronto, talking about having health and dental benefits. Anybody aware of health and dental benefits? Some people. So what health and dental benefits are means I can go to the doctor, I can get my eyes checked, I can get reimbursement for my prescription glasses that I have, I can go to the dentist, I can get my teeth cleaned, I can get my cavities, and my employer has a program in place where I either have contributions that come off of my paycheck to participate in this plan, or I pay a percentage of what the total cost is. So let's say the BDC pays 80% of my cost at the dentist and I pay 20% of my cost at the dentist. These are things that are really attractive about employers and your job seeking process that you're really interested in, particularly those of us who have families and want to have benefits for our spouse and for our children. But the Government of Ontario, the Ministry of Labour, does not have an Employment Standards Act that says that employers must have this. So this is going above and beyond. This is an additional benefit that you would receive. So a good question to ask when you're looking for jobs to apply to or when you're interviewing, what do the health and dental benefits look like? But the reality is employers don't have to have them. So if an employer is offering it, this is a bonus. We're going to talk about leaves of absence. I'm not going to go into all of these, but I want you to be aware that these are all acceptable leaves of absence in the province of Ontario. On the handouts that we gave you that had the Employment Standards Act, there's a website on there. You can go to that website and find more information. I'm going to talk to you about the most popular one today, and that's pregnancy and parental leave. So pregnancy and parental leave in the province of Ontario, pregnant employees have the right to take pregnancy leave of up to 17 weeks of time off. So that means this is for the ladies only. Sorry, gentlemen, but this is for the ladies only. They're carrying the baby. They're entitled to 17 weeks that are related to having that process. This can start before the birth of the baby. Some people take it, a couple weeks before. Some people wait till the baby's born. But effective when the baby's born, ladies are entitled to the 17 weeks. Don't worry, gentlemen, you're included in here.
Yeah, because we are going to help.
You're going to help. Absolutely. Absolutely. You are right. That almost deserves a prize, New parents, this is what we call parental leave. So we have pregnancy leave at the top and then parental leave at the bottom. So birth mothers who took pregnancy leave are entitled to up to another 35 weeks. This totals 52 weeks or a full year. And then any other new parents are entitled to 37 weeks of parental leave. So what I want to say to you is some people adopt children. If you adopt a child, the 37 weeks follows. What the big consideration to take as you and your partner plan out what the child care leave, the pregnancy and parental leave will look like, is going to be related to your employment insurance benefits or your unemployment pay that you would get. Because the government has rules about the lady taking it and the man taking it. And I would want you to, when this situation happens, to make sure that you're calling Service Canada. And what often happens is they say, in total, for the birth of a child, you can take up to the 52 weeks. But usually what they won't do is give an unemployment check to the mom for 52 and an unemployment check to the dad for 37. What they'll do is they'll take it in total and they'll say, yeah, let's say the mom can take the first 10 months, she'll get unemployment, and then the next 2 months the dad can take and get unemployment. I'm not an expert at this, but when it comes to taking time off, if it's going to be a combined approach where mom and dad both want to take time off and use employment insurance benefits, then I want you to call Service Canada and really understand the implications of taking the time off and using employment insurance benefits. Okay?
Yeah, what's the percentage they give the government?
The percentage that they give the government?
From the wage.
It maxes out at a certain number I'm not an expert on this. I don't have any kids. I've never had to do this. So I'm not an expert on it. But there is a max benefit that you can receive, which I think, I don't even want to give you a number because it's not my area of expertise, but Service Canada is the one who takes care of your employment insurance benefits. So when we talked about the deductions that happen, that come off of your paycheck, and we talked about unemployment insurance, this is a benefit that you can receive when you go on leave. Employees have the right to continue participating in certain benefit plans and continue to earn credit for length of employment, length of service, seniority. So even though you're off having either a pregnancy leave or a parental leave, your years of service, some of these benefits still accumulate. I know we don't want to think about not having a job because we're focused on getting a job and it's all about landing that first job. But this is part of the Employment Standards Act. This is an area that's covered, and that's what happens when the relationship is terminated and severance pay. So in Ontario, there's a couple different expressions for being let go, discharged, dismissed, fired, permanently laid off, all meaning that your employment has been terminated. And there's some rules that the employer must follow when it comes to ending their employment relationship with you. Basically, you either need written notice of termination or termination pay in lieu of notice. And I'm going to show you what that chart looks like. We won't spend a lot of time on it today, but know if your employer comes to you and says you're losing your job, you want to come back to the Employment Standards Act and you want to make sure that they have followed the rules with respect to letting you go. So I'm going to leave it here. We're not going to get into all of this. You can refer back to it when you want to take a look. But just like the minimum wage chart, here is the chart for the notice. So if you've been with the employer less than 1 year, they need to give you 1 week of notice. And as your length of service goes on, you see that there's an increased amount of notice. So this is to help us as employees say, I understand my employer that we might not be doing that great in sales. I understand that we might be not as successful as we've been in the past. Maybe you need to lay people off, we need to cut back production, but I have bills to pay too, so I need a little bit of notice. I can't just be the door locked and not be able to go to work. And if you don't give me the notice, then you need to give me pay in lieu of that notice so I have a little bit of financial comfort. So we won't focus on this now because we're all getting jobs. But if we lose a job for some reason, we want to make sure that our rights are being followed. Question?
If you're leaving the job, how much is the notice?
2 weeks notice. The golden, pardon me?
No matter the period is?
No matter, I would say no matter the period, you know your employer, right? If you have a critical job and you work on long-term projects, the challenge that you get into with more than 2 weeks is then it's bad blood, right? Like, oh, they're leaving and I can't believe they're leaving and quitting their job and what are we gonna do? The benefit of more than 2 weeks is you let me as the employer start to plan for a replacement. So I would say 2 weeks is the golden rule, nothing less. Don't give them less than 2 weeks notice. If you feel that you're in a particular industry or a particular job where more than 2 weeks would be beneficial, you're gonna be a professional on that one, weigh out the pros and cons. For me, I operate with a 2 weeks notice, whether it was Burger King or whether it's the BDC. That's the kind of mind frame that I have in terms of giving my notice. And always a written letter with your signature, with the date that you're submitting it, and then the date that your 2 weeks notice will be effective by.
أنا برأيي كمان هي شغلة مهمة إن نحن نعرفها لأنه ممكن أول شغلات نلاقي شغل بعدين نلاقي شغل أحسن من الشغل اللي فيه. دائما ضروري كثير هون بكندا إن نحن نعطي نوت أو مثل ملاحظة للموظف على الأقل لازم تكون أسبوعين. ما فيني أنا مثلا أروح أشتغل مع حدا وبعدين أقول له يلا باي أنا بكرة موقف. نحن دائما لازم نعطي على الأقل أسبوعين بشكل قانوني والمفضل إنه ينعطى أكثر من أسبوعين. نحكي مثلا مدة شهر. لحتى كمان نحن نضل علاقتنا منيحة مع هدول الموظفين نحن كنا عندهم.
I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to break my golden rule of 2 weeks. Because what I want to say is sometimes we're going to take survival jobs. And what a survival job is it's for me, who's now a commercial lender and a certified human resources leader. A survival job for me would be going back to Tim Hortons where I've worked and kind of going back to more of a service-based job. I would go back to that if I didn't have my job at the BDC because I would need to pay my bills and I would need to survive. So this would be a survival job. If you're landing a first job and it's not that kind of profession that you really are aspiring to, but you're working a survival job, and then BDC calls you and says, I need you to start Monday, and it's Monday of this week, and they say, I need you to start next Monday, the 28th. I don't want you to tell BDC, no BDC, I can't start that day because I've got 2 weeks that I need to give to Tim Hortons, right? What I want you to do is go to Tim Hortons as soon as possible and really be honest with them and say, listen, I can only give you a week's notice. I'm sincerely apologetic about that, but I can't miss out on this opportunity. This is in my field. This is better aligned with my skills and abilities, and it's a better, decision. So the 2 weeks is the golden rule, but have your common sense approach on this. Don't throw away a terrific opportunity if it's in the field of choice. Don't quit Tim Hortons in a week to go join McDonald's, but if it's a better opportunity for you, you're able to break that golden rule so long as you're being respectful and communicative with your employer. And they're not going to be mad at you for that. They're going to respect that decision. Okay? Ministry of Labor is the beautiful group that created the Employment Standards Act and runs this. They can be followed on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. They've got some videos. Here's their website. Again, we won't go into it, but just so you have it if you need to come back to it. Occupational health and safety. Woo! Safe at work, it's really, really important. Safety at work is hugely important. It's really a big part of the Canadian workplace culture. Safety in the workplace is really fundamental. So here's what the poster looks like, guys. You've all got a copy of the poster in English and in Arabic. The Ontario Ministry of Labour, again, covers health and safety, occupational health and safety. And we are governed by the Ontario Occupational Health and Safety Act. So what the Act features, and there we go again. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead of myself. We'll play a little game. So why is health and safety important in the workplace? What can happen? What's a hazard, danger, possible injury? I throw it out there. I do a lot of this, so you guys can come back to me. How could we potentially get hurt at work?
Falling off the scaffold, inhaling something.
Inhaling, slips and falls.
عم نسأل كيف ممكن نتأذى بالشغل؟ كيف ممكن مثلا مكان العمل
Chemicals, substances, falls, break. You can do any, there's so many hazards, right? Even for us, if this was where we worked, we could slip and fall on the ice outside. Something could fall on us. There's a lot of hazards. Working with new tools or machines, you could get cuts or lose your limbs. Lifting heavy things, boxes, for example. If you don't lift the proper way, I can hurt my back. Doing the same action over and over again, back, arm, or neck pain. When I worked at Burger King and I used to have to feed the burgers on the broiler, the constant gripping of the tongs and putting it on, I'd start to get some carpal tunnel symptoms. Falling, slipping, we talked about that one. Working with chemicals, we talked about that one. There's a lot of hazards. So this is the really cool part about Ontario. They're big on educating workers. And if I'm successful here, we're going to watch this video. So it'll take me off the radar. But there are a ton of videos and resources like this for you, particularly if you guys have kids who are going into the workplace, if you maybe have some older people who are going into jobs that they've never done that are part of your circle. These are good resources to take a look at. And here's one about working in the restaurant business.
My name is Alan Mendoza, Occupational Health and Safety Inspector of the Ministry of Labour, Central East Region. The Ministry of Labour conducts inspections of Ontario workplaces, including commercial kitchens, to protect workers from slip, trip, fall, and other hazards. Almost 20% of injuries, and sometimes fatalities, in Ontario workplaces are a result of slips, trips, and falls.
20%
Most of these, if
slips.
not all, are preventable. I'll be showing you what the Ministry of Labour looks for when inspecting a commercial kitchen for compliance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
Hi there. My name's Alan Mendoza, Ministry of Labour, Health and Safety Inspector.
When we first arrive, we'd like to speak with the owner of the establishment or someone who's in charge of occupational health and safety.
Do you have the working representative from the Joint Health and Safety Committee available? Actually, perfect. I'd love for them to join us when we conduct our physical inspection.
Remember that term, Joint Health and Safety Committee.
To speak to someone who represents workers, who can be a health and safety representative or a worker representative on the Joint Health and Safety Committee. The employer's responsibilities include providing information and instruction to workers about hazards on their job.
Your one hand is on this side of the guard. Your hand should never be anywhere near this blade. The other side can hold down here or hold onto the table so you get ready to turn it on.
There needs to be adequate worker training and supervision. The employer has a responsibility to implement policies, procedures, and safe work practices in the workplace for the protection of workers.
And we always turn the machine off before we reach and take the product.
They need to identify hazards in the workplace and implement measures to control them. Workers should be encouraged to report workplace hazards to their employer and their supervisor. The employer is required to ensure that legislative postings are placed in a conspicuous location in the workplace, such as an information board where they can find the Occupational Health and Safety Act, a copy of the employer's health and safety policy, as well as the Ministry of Labor Health and Safety posted. In commercial kitchens, we are looking for non-slip floors, prompt cleanup of spills, secured mats, adequate lighting, clear walkways, suitable footwear. Should spills occur in the workplace, appropriate signage should be placed warning other workers of the hazard. We're looking for clear access and egress to and from freezer and fridge rooms. The equipment in the workplace should be maintained in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. When it comes to mixers in the workplace, workers are trained in safe usage and operation and demonstrate an understanding of how to operate the guarding or lockout system.
So how often do you use the mixers in the workplace?
We use these every day.
Okay. And are workers trained in how to use them and operate them?
Absolutely.
Great. And if any issues with machines come up, so if they're damaged or need to be maintained, what do workers do at that point?
What the workers need to do is report it immediately to either myself or the supervisor on duty.
Okay.
Employers should ensure that workers are trained in the use of deep fryers. They should be using the baskets when placing food into the fryer, and they should know the appropriate procedure to use when clean out of old fryer oil takes place. Eye wash stations and hand wash stations should be accessible. Workers who move material on carts should have clear, unobstructed views of the path of travel. If not, they should have another worker assist them while moving the cart. Workers should be trained in the appropriate use and selection of ladders, selecting the right ladder for the job, maintaining appropriate three-point contact, and ensuring that material handling is kept to a minimum. We all have the right to work in a safe and healthy environment. A strong occupational health and safety culture requires all the workplace parties to pay attention to health and safety issues and follow safe work practices. Most, if not all, of these accidents are preventable. For more information, please visit these websites.
So, common sense, a lot of it, but know that there's some rights and responsibilities. So that is an actual inspector who will go out into different workplaces and ensure that the health and safety standards are being followed. So this BDC's actually been audited. We had a health and safety inspector come. We're just an office building. We're not a kitchen. We don't have slips and falls going on all the time. But they will come and they will do a walk-around inspection, and they will ensure that these posters are hanging, that there are joint health and safety committees or health and safety reps. So I want you to be aware that this is part of the ongoing safety culture that we have in Ontario, is to be sure not only that people are educated, but two, that we're making sure that the rules are being followed. So there's three things that you remember about health and safety when it comes to working in Ontario. You have the right to know, the right to participate, and the right to refuse. So the right to know. Your employers and supervisors, similar to what was said in the video, they must give you the information, training, and supervision for the different equipment and procedures that you have, tell you about any dangers in the workplace, and you have the ability to take reasonable precautions. They need to make sure that safe work procedures are in place and that the tools and machinery, personal protective equipment are being used properly. Ensure that the safety equipment is in good condition. So this is your employer's responsibility. I used to build transport trucks. Where I'm from is an automotive part of the world, southwestern Ontario. So I used to work in the back of trucks, and I had a job that I was too short to do. I'm only 5'2". I've got the benefit of high heels on today. So I had a job that I was too short to do. I was supposed to get into the back of the transport truck, take my drill, go up top, and drill in a piece. And this is honestly what it looked like. I couldn't reach it. So tippy toes, I couldn't reach it. They put a milk crate. They stood it upside down. They said, stand on that while the line is moving and drill it in. Not acceptable. Again, I was a young worker. I didn't know my rights. I was just happy to have a job. I wasn't going to cause a stink. The line, so all these transports move on a line. The line jammed. Something happened and the line jammed. That means my cart stopped. That means my milk cart, which wasn't secured to anything and not safe at all, slipped underneath of me. I fell through the dog hole, which is a space that they leave out for the engine and all the different wires to come in. Fell down through the dog hole on the line. So I knew going into this that the milk crate was not a safe thing for me to do. It wasn't secure. I knew going into it. But I said I was young. This was a good paying job. I didn't want to cause a stink. I can tell you I wasn't hurt in this accident. Had I have been hurt, I would have been really mad at myself for not saying to my employer in that moment, listen, this isn't unsafe. Can we get somebody else to do this portion of the job who has the physical abilities to do it? So I just want to leave that with you and say that employers have to do these things However, they might not. And if they don't, I encourage you to again be vocal and take your safety number one. Nobody wants to lose a limb. Nobody wants to be permanently injured. And ultimately, nobody wants to lose their life. So employers in Canada are very good. But coming from the Canadian girl who's worked for Canadian employers, it might not always be perfect. So empower yourself to know these rights. There's also, you cooperatively work with your team here. There's also some duties that we have as workers. Because it's a two-way process, right? It's the employers and us. We need to work safely together. As a worker, you must use the safety equipment that your employer tells you to use. Oh, I don't like to wear the hard hat. It messes up my hair. No, it looks really good right now. I don't want to wear it. Too bad, so sad. You have to wear the equipment that's there. Tell your employer if you see any broken equipment. Because the reality is if I'm a supervisor on the line, I'm managing 15 different people, right? I don't know that your particular machine isn't working up to speed. If there's anything wrong with that machine, let your employer know. Don't use anything that could harm you or another worker, and act responsibly. So I'll bore you with another 2-second story. I had a couple guys on the line. We used to move these big transport trucks from the cabs from one line to another line so something else could be done. These guys are messing around at the end of the shift, ha ha ha. Drops the truck on a guy's foot and just crushes his foot. It was the end of the shift. They were just having fun. You know, it was supposed to be a joke until somebody can't use their left foot anymore, right? So be responsible. Fun and games is great, not when it comes to being safe in the workplace. Report any violations. So if another employee isn't being safe, make sure that you're reporting this as well. This is the actual Occupational Health and Safety Act. It's a little green book like this. It will be displayed in your workplace. In terms of your right to participate, this is the ability where you have to either be a health and safety rep or on the Joint Health and Safety Committee. You don't have to participate. You don't have to be a health and safety committee rep. But if you are interested in health and safety is something you're passionate about, talk to your employer about how to participate in these groups. So if it's under 20, you're going to have a health and safety rep. And if it's over 20, you're going to have a Joint and Health and Safety Committee. Right to refuse unsafe work. This is another poster that you guys would have seen in that video. Another one of the mandatory posters that goes in. This tells you if you are injured, what the steps are to report it. But I'd hope if it's going to be unsafe and we know it going into it, we're going to refuse it. You can legally refuse to do work that you think might hurt you or another employee. And your boss does not have the ability to fire you or reprimand you for you refusing to work. There is a process. If this is engaged and you say, I refuse to work on that machine, I don't think it's safe, there is a process that's going to be followed, but you cannot get in trouble for refusing to work. So just like we couldn't get in trouble for saying about the employment standards, we're not going to get in trouble for exercising our health and safety rights either. Violence and harassment, just a quick piece to touch on. Workplace violence and workplace harassment is not permitted in the workplace. Specifically when it comes to harassment, bullying, intimidating, making offensive jokes, etc. These things are not acceptable in the workplace. Be aware in your work environment, if you feel that you're being harassed or if you feel that you're being any workplace violence, these are things you need to report and that you don't have to suffer as an employee. All right. Ontario Human Rights Code. I'm going to try to zip through this because we've got some things to do. The Ontario Human Rights Code says that every person has a right to equal treatment with respect to employment without discrimination. And it covers these grounds. We're going to play a little game. Interviewers cannot ask. So when you go on your interviews, because we're all going to be landing these great jobs for tomorrow morning, there's going to be a series of questions that they're going to try to ask you to try to get to know you better as an employee. But a lot of things that they might want to ask you, you don't have to answer, or they should ask it in a different way. So when it comes to nationality, are you a Canadian citizen and what is your native tongue? They cannot ask you this. If they ask you these questions, you are not going to answer.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yep.
When we are preparing our resume, we are already telling them that we work, about our previous experiences that we worked in Syria.
Yep.
So it before going to the interview, it somehow tells the employer that about our nationality.
Yep.
So
this is true. This is true. And you might have some people, I'm going to be honest, you might have some people who look at your resume and say, oh, that person worked in Nigeria. I don't know that I want to, but that's discrimination and that's illegal. The challenge is how do we know it? How do I know if I'm worked in Nigeria and I submit my resume and I'm not ever called for an interview? How do I know that that's what I was discriminated based on? I could have just not been a successful candidate. So you are right, during the resume submission process, you might face discrimination. It's harder to detect. When you go to an interview, if they ask you any of these questions, you're going to know right away that, you know, this is something that they're not able to ask you. And what I want to impart with you guys is there's a lot of organizations like the BDC who want people with international experience because we really value that. If somebody can't value your experience and value who you are because you've come from a different country, I'm going to suggest you probably don't want to work for them. Right?
One more comment on the same question.
Yeah, I just wanted to, so obviously we had you building a magnet profile on a site that was set up for Syrian refugees, and you see how there was another place for companies to come and hire Syrian refugees. So I just want to explain it. There are a lot of companies that want to help, so they will be looking for you, okay? But your profile is also available no matter where an employer comes into the system. And we actually have an anonymous process. So if they're looking for a civil engineer, they'll find all the civil engineers, and we actually take out the location of your previous employment. So they see initially an anonymous profile that doesn't have your name, doesn't have your place of employment, doesn't have where you went to school. It just says you have the skills.
Okay.
Do you understand? So if they're coming in and say, I want to engage Syrian refugees or help, that's a good thing, and they're going to connect you. If you have a profile in the system and they come in somewhere else, it's actually, and we've been seeing, we're really excited to do research because we know that anonymizing the process actually reduces what we call early stage bias. And once they, kind of get further into your profile, they don't just, eliminate it early on in the selection process. You have a lot better chance of connecting. So, but having said that, I think it's really important to note, if there are issues there, that could be a caution sign for an employer, right? If an employer after that process is going to have an issue, that's something you want to, take note and talk to your support, the people that are supporting you in your job search. Okay. So I just
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Whenever I was applying to a certain job,
Yep.
they asked, are you legally
Are you legally entitled to work in Canada?
And they put in the Canadian citizen, permanent resident, refugee, or work permit.
Okay, they've really listed it. The only thing that they can ask you is, are you authorized to work in Canada? So I would not fill out any of that. I would just say yes. Are you legally entitled to work in Canada? And they give you all these boxes. I wouldn't select a box. I would just say yes. Break the rules, right? Okay.
Sometimes it doesn't go through.
Right? This is online.
Especially online, if you apply for even companies, I'm talking about companies like even TV channels here. It doesn't go through unless you choose online.
So this is an interesting piece. For me, if this is Amber and I'm having an issue with this, I would call their HR team. I would call their HR team and I would say, can you help me to understand, what this process is? And I'm sure then, so that's not getting noticed, right? I'm applying online and I came across this question, but my understanding is, this is the way I answer the question, but I'm seeing on your site, I'm not sure how I should proceed. And I'd like to talk to somebody about my application process.
Because you already feel discriminated.
For sure.
When you see all this and then what are you trying to tell me? Then there's level.
Well, and this takes in Ontario. This should not be the case. It could be a really positive intent. Maybe I really want to help people who only have work permits, and I want to specifically kind of run a program through those candidates. That could be an intent. The reality is, if I were to face this, I would personally call and just try to get help from the company in understanding the application process. When in doubt, pick up the phone and ask them. Or consult your community partners and say, I'm seeing this. Can you help me through this process? Community partners say, talk to us first. Talk to us first. These are the experts. And again, not what's your native tongue, because that doesn't really matter. But what languages you can read, speak, or write fluently, that's the real skill that we're looking for, right? I'm going to try to go through this quickly because I have a lot of talking to do still left. Religion, we're not going to get too into it. But what days are you available to work, and are you able to work with the required schedule? That's a legitimate question, right? I'm Christian, I go to church on Sundays. If I can't work on Sunday, it's not because I'm Christian, it's because I have another commitment. Age, how old are you? You can't ask me how old I am, but what are my long-term career goals? That's an appropriate question to ask. Marital and family status, do you have a maiden name? Do you have or plan to have children? If you get pregnant, will you continue to work? No. Family status, are you available to work overtime on occasion and can you travel? So really, it's none of the employer's business whether or not I have children or if I plan to have children. We'll keep going here. Gender, we've always had a man or woman do this job, right? In the warehouse, I've always had a man do this job. I'm sure you're gonna be able to stack up. And if they ask you a question that you don't feel comfortable saying, hold on, you're not allowed to ask me that, what they can ask empowers you to answer the question in a different way than what they've asked. So if they say, oh, are you religious and what days do you observe? Well, I'm able to work your schedule. I can work overtime, etc. It gives you some vocabulary to answer the question in a different way. What I will say is back to the discrimination on the resume. If you find people are asking you questions like this, my spidey sense is going to go up and I'm going to go, do I really want to work for this employer?
And one more thing, guys, because it's really important. Usually with our culture, we have something called CV, curriculum vitae. The form of the CV is a lot different than the form of a resume. And a CV, sometimes we put a picture, we put gender, we put some companies even they ask for like date of birth and all of that. All of that don't exist in Canada on a resume. We don't need to put those information. So always be cautious about information that you put on your resume. It's not the same as your CV. And again, we can always ask our help, the partner's help, and that's something easy to notice.
Absolutely, terrific point. So Canadian Workplace 101, this is my favorite. I could have talked to you guys about this stuff all day. But what we say is greetings. So I said good afternoon when I started. Really common in the Canadian workplace, and you'll even see people on the street, etc. Good morning, hello. Greeting people when you first see them is really important. It's a really important part of the workplace culture. Dealing with other employees, we say to have good working relationships. If you get into a tiff, somebody kind of makes a comment or is being a little cold, the first time you can play it off to they're having a bad day. This is common in our culture. If it's happening again, the way that we like to address workplace conflict with coworkers is to have a one-on-one sit down. So to say, can I talk to you for a second? I noticed this, are we okay? And to have a one-on-one dialogue. So try to address it with the person first. Let the first one go, it might be a bad day. Second one, address it with the person, and if after you address it with the person you're unsuccessful, then you want to report it to your manager or to human resources or to somebody else. But the kind of conflict resolution amongst colleagues, we're colleagues, let's see if we can work it out together. Dealing with your boss, bosses are generally treated a little bit more formally. Some organizations are very formal. I would say most organizations are kind of semi-formal. You have to respect your boss, but it's not a Mr. So-and-so or a Mrs. So-and-so. Ellen was my boss, and I called her Ellen. That was, not Miss Austin, but I called her Ellen. So judge the workplace that you're in. Bosses are treated with a little bit more formality, but depending on the culture of the place that you're in, you'll apply the right amount of formality. Doors. This is a random one, but it's especially when you're coming into meetings, etc. Hold the door open for the person behind you. Different cultures approach it different ways. Some people would let a group of 50 go ahead of them and open the door. For us, it's just common to make sure that you're holding the door open for the person behind you. If you want to be really nice, make a good impression, hold it for 10. 50, people will just keep coming in the door all day and you'll never get a break. You will be the doorman. Multicultural work.
Another job.
The doorman, right? One of the really interesting things about Ontario, particularly the GTA, is we're so multicultural. Most of us have never worked with so many different cultures in one place at a time. There are awesome resources on the internet. If you're not sure how to work with different cultures, Google it, or in my favorite is ask the person. People are so open here. I'm part of a lunch club at work, and we have a very diverse group of like 15 people. We have Indian, we have Macedonian, we have Russian, we have Canadian, and any cultural differences, we just ask. What's the practice? What's polite? What's the way to approach this? Don't be afraid to ask. Proper introductions. If I'm talking with Allison and somebody joins our group and they know me, I'm going to introduce Allison. That's the nice way to go about it, is to introduce the person that you're with. And then appointments. The big thing I will say here, because I'm really big on this, even though we live in the GTA, is don't be late. Don't be late. Don't be late for your interview. And I'm getting the finger wave out here and I'm being really serious. Don't be late. We're really, really, really serious about lateness, and particularly when you're looking for a job, get there 10 minutes early. Go there before your job interview, practice the route. Practice the route, make sure you get there 10 minutes early. Don't go an hour early, that's a little too keen. We know you want the job, but maybe you want it a little too bad if you're there an hour early. 10 minutes beforehand, don't be late. If you're going to be late, email and let them know.
The Syrian standard 10-minute late doesn't work.
No.
10-15 minutes doesn't work.
No.
بشوفك الظهر العصر المغرب
Be on time. This is the last piece that I have from you in terms of the education this session. I went to my colleagues at BDC and I said, hey, I'm doing this session. What would you take if we had somebody joining the team? What would you say? Customer service is everything. It makes the world go round here in Ontario. It's a huge differentiator. And as a team, we all work with this in mind. Be you. We want to know who you are. Don't change yourself. Be you, but respect others because everybody's going to be different than you. Joke around, but be serious about getting the job done. So we can take a quick minute break, we can have a joke, but we still need to be focused on the task at hand. Have fun and bond by participating in team activities. So sometimes people go out for drinks after work, or they go to a baseball game, or they take a class. Be open to these types of experiences. Learn the acronyms for your workplace quickly. There's nothing worse than people talking in a whole nother language than English, and you're like, I have no clue what ASAP means, or MIA, or TBC. Ask these things and get yourself up to speed with them quickly. It helps you integrate a little quicker into the team. Ethics and accountability are important. They're hugely important. The people who you work with are going to be looking for these attributes in you. Watch the news and TV shows. This is water cooler talk. So when people get in the morning, they want to talk about the sports games. They want to talk about what's happened on the news. This helps you to feel, integrated into the culture. So at my job, we're in a March Madness pool. So all weekend, NCAA men's college basketball in the States is going on. And we've all got brackets, and we're in a competition to see who's going to win the tournament. This is something we do as a workplace. Always know the weather. This is super Canadian. We complain about the weather every single day. So here's my little infographic for you. Always know the weather. You can have a conversation with any Canadian right away by talking about the weather. Don't be afraid to ask questions. We're really warm, people. Our workplaces are really warm. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Be open to going to coffee, eating lunch with people. Social is part of our culture. And like Ellen said, network, network, network. It's everything. There's a saying, it's not what you know, but who you know. It's what you know. Don't let them fool you. But it's who you know that gets in the door, right? So be a team player, guys. And you're amazing. This is your assets already, language abilities. You have transferable skills and experiences. You're adaptable. You're good at problem solving. And most important, you've got a positive attitude and determination. So you already have huge, assets going into this job search process. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.